Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callus. It is the last day of the month of May. It is a Wednesday, and for those of you that don't know, early voting is going on, so we have an opportunity to preserve the Collin College board, or you can flip it over the progressive leftists. I'm sure they would love to destroy Collin College, like they have every other institution of higher learning. The choice is yours, Collin County. What are you going to do about it? All right, today, don't run your mouths. Or don't be running your mouths. However you want to phrase it, we're going to have a little fun, and I'll give the final title at the end, and we'll put it up on here. Episode 425, but before I get into the meat of the story, let me remind you, you can help me like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. If you feel so enthusiastic, you could also rate and review this podcast. We're on the primary social media of Facebook, Gab, and occasionally I pop in MeWe, and I do share on Instagram from time to time. Currently, we're still hosting at Podbean, and this is an old story, but I've been trying to figure out what the better option is, and I just haven't found the good fit yet. So, for the time being, you can be sure to find me on pretty much every podcatcher out there, and a lot of these go up on YouTube as audio only. So, here we go, on with the show. All right. When you're running your mouth, when you're on offense, you're telegraphing what you're going to do before you actually do it. And honestly, the progressives are masters of manipulating people and, quite frankly, beating quote-unquote conservatives all the time. But what's even worse yet is our own team, the establishment, if you will. They're almost as bad as progressives. They do their best to sell us out at every turn. And while we're talking about this, I'm talking about the establishment, not necessarily the same thing as rhinos, and most certainly not the same thing as moderates. A lot of moderates probably are no more enthusiastic about the establishment than right of center, conservative Christians are, but they also understand that more often than not, the establishment gives the moderates what they want. They just don't like it because they're icky too. So we've watched things play out. The legislature assured us, we just didn't have time to do the things that we needed to do. Never mind that they wasted 2/3 of the time they were down there. Never mind that they took special time out to spike the ball on a former state representative, and then took additional time out to punish somebody that spoke out against Dade Phelan. Now, both of those, you could make the claim that they were legitimate actions for them to take. Okay, fine. If I'm in a kind mood, I'll gift you that. They are legitimate actions for the state legislature. But what's even more legitimate is, the Republican majority passing the priorities of the platform and the party of which they say they're a part of, rather than selling us out. But it's the same old show every time. I don't know if we can even claim that they've got more than one priority passed. They certainly didn't do anything with the border of any consequence. They certainly didn't do anything with election integrity with any consequence. I mean, I'm sure they'll have a couple of special sessions so they can gin up their numbers so that when they go and run for re-election, they can claim that they did good work. And then, of course, the vast majority of the people will hold their nose and re-elect these guys and gals. And they will do the same thing all over again. But this time perhaps the straw that's going to break the camel's back has been done. We'll see. I mean, for those of you that do pay attention at the national level, the establishment Republicans sold us out on the debt ceiling. No surprise there. The worst part about it is McCarthy didn't really get anything for his caving in, right? He's just another cuckold over there in D.C., But again, we shouldn't be surprised. But in Austin, where we have all three branches with solid majorities Republican. Granted, that doesn't equate with conservative. We can't even get basic liberty protecting priorities passed with any regularity. They pass watered down versions that they then turn around and try and claim it's the real thing and that they did it for us and they have our back and they want what's best. Hey, but don't worry, they found time to pass through bills on gambling, which I'm pretty sure was not on the platform and most certainly was not in the priorities. Funny how that works, isn't it? Oh, and don't worry, they ignored everything that the party had to say about appointing Democrats as committee chairman. And, well, I am somewhat sympathetic to some of their arguments. If you have a majority, you need to act like you have a majority and you need to get stuff done if you are in the majority. This will not continue if and when the Democrats actually take over. And they're fools to think that they're buying any goodwill. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. What do I know? Okay, so here we go. On with the show. Now that I've burned up 5 minutes of the intro here. Unfortunately, there are a whole lot of people that are convinced, particularly in Collin County, that all of our state reps are going to be replaced. They're convinced that they're going to find good challengers. They're convinced that it's their last term. And while I would love nothing more than for there to be a whole lot of truth in that, I have to take a pause and embrace the reality that I live in. And I quite frankly don't see $2 to $3 million coming to Collin County to replace these incumbents. In my humble opinion, that's what it's going to take to do it. But let's assume there's some truth. Let's assume we're going to get half of that money at least. So what does that mean? That means we need people writing checks, but we also need people not writing checks that they can't cash. We need people to cool down, not telegraph their move, not tell their future opponent exactly what they're going to do. Now, I'm fairly certain that the 4 Republican reps of consequence in Collin County, Justin Holland's really not of any consequence, but that's Rockwell's problem. But of the other 4, I'm fairly certain that they are very confident that whatever they're going to magically get accomplished in these special sessions is going to make up for their betrayal of Ken Paxton, for lack of a better way to phrase it. I think they're going to kiss and make up with the grassroots is what they're saying, but that's going to cost them a great deal of money. Hey, but never mind. Uncle Dade's going to run to the rescue, right? Maybe. But let's say that you're not buying it, that you want these guys all gone. There's 4 of them. You know, there are, I guess, 2 that are weaker than the others, in my humble opinion, but weaker for different reasons, and weaker being relative. Okay? But again, if you're going to run against these guys, you're going to gin up the army and go after them, you should not be telegraphing what you're going to do. You shouldn't, lay it all out there on social media. Now, I personally, I'm kind of put off by the fact that my man Frazier made it a vote to indict Ken Paxton while he himself is under indictment. Now, I've said publicly before, and I'll say it again, I believe that the indictment on Frazier is largely garbage, much like I believe the indictments that Paxton's under are entirely garbage. But there is the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So that has always kind of held me back because I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't say for certain. It is interesting that apparently, allegedly, my man Frazier is also a Brady cop. He is also on leave in Dallas PD. I would assume that has more to do with the fact that he's in session than he's in trouble. But whenever IA is involved, you never know what's going to happen. So, but I'm not going to spend all my time beating up on the guy because other than this one vote, he hasn't been terrible. He's kind of lived up to my expectations. Not that I had the highest expectations for any of our state reps in Collin County, with the exception of maybe Matt. but that's a different story. So I'm stuck with the problem that these guys are becoming, if not already, fully enmeshed into the establishment down there, and they really don't give a rip about the people that they're supposed to represent. And they have the money now, guaranteed now, to fight off any challenge in the primary. Now, they may believe this, and they may actually have the money, but that's no guarantee. So again, we're going to need some people writing some checks, and we're going to need a whole lot of other people not writing checks with their mouths that they can't cash with their bodies. Okay, so that's part one of this. Part two, directly related, bad moves. You don't trash people and break a relationship with somebody that unfortunately you might be stuck with later on. You don't want to completely burn it to the ground. Now, sometimes they deserve it. Sometimes it's necessary, absolutely necessary, to cut off all connection. But you have to keep in mind, there are still going to be special sessions. We still want these guys that are going to go down there to at least pretend to pay attention to what we want and what we tell them. And if you burn them to the stake now, or burn them at the stake now, they have zero interest in anything we have to say. They might as well go all in establishment and tell us all to go to hell, excuse my French, and do what they want because they know they're going to get the money. But the real underlying problem is you can't dismiss these guys unless you're confident that, one, you have a really good candidate to run against them, and two, that you have a solid army to go after them with, notwithstanding the money that's going to be necessary. So it's a bad move to burn it to the ground right now across the board. Just my opinion on the matter. I could be proven wrong. But the other thing to consider is if you damage these guys enough, we might very well end up with Democrats in multiple seats in Collin County. And I got to tell you, if it were to happen to one seat to teach a lesson, I probably wouldn't lose sleep over that. But the reality is you give up one, you're going to give up more. The reality is if you lose one, you're going to lose more. So I'm not sure which is worse. The guy that's going to shoot you in the head with the gun standing in front of you with a D on his t-shirt, or the guy that's going to knife you in the back in your kidneys standing behind you with an R on his t-shirt. I don't know which is worse. You're dead either way you go. This then directly goes into the idea that we have to put the right foot forward. And that is a double entendre, right? We want the right to have more influence. We want the right, and I've got the little scare quotes up, to have more power. Now, I am quite nervous with power. And my libertarian or liberty-oriented background bristles at the idea of giving more power to a single group of people, and just for no other reason than that to expect that they're going to abuse it, which we have seen multiple times. Even when they're not in complete power, people will abuse that power. But if you put the right people in, both figuratively and literally, we should be able to expect better results than what we're getting now. But we have to also make sure that we get the right candidate. It's one thing to get a candidate that says he's one of you. It's one thing to get a candidate that can answer questions on a questionnaire the correct way or the ideal way, and maybe he lulls you to sleep or she lulls you to sleep that, well, I'm one of you. I'm going to do. We have a long track record of doing that in multiple counties here in North Texas, where we go and recruit somebody. We think they're going to be better than the establishment hack. We fight tooth and nail to replace the establishment hack, and what do you know? In 2 to 4 terms, we find out that the person that we spent all that time and effort putting in there to protect our liberties is really no better than the person they replaced. And if you doubt me, you can look up True Texas Project, and I'm sure that Julie or Fran over there that can tell you all about it. It's not a new phenomenon. I'm sure that there are people that were around when the McKinney Tea Party was a thing and the Frisco Tea Party was a thing, and they could tell you all about it. They come along, they say they're one of us, they're going to do the right things, and then they get there and they don't. Now, fortunately, the people that are still in Collin County, they haven't strayed. Oh, yes, there's difference of opinions and there's different ideas, and that's all well and good. And I personally am not offended by that. I can appreciate that if somebody is honest and says up front, well, you know what, we're on all these things except for these couple things here. We're just not going to agree. And you make that educated decision, that choice to support them anyway, and they hold true to whatever their principles are. Great. The problem is most of the people that we send down to Austin, they lie about their principles, or they break their principles as soon as they get down there, or worse than that, they never had any principles to begin with. And I think that's really what the problem is. So if we're going to go to this time and effort to replace these people that don't follow our principles, that don't agree with us, that sell us out, what's to prevent them from doing it again in the future? So again, we have to be careful that we get the right person. You can't run your mouth saying, I got candidate Y to take out candidate X because candidate Y is so awesome, and then turn around and find out, well, candidate Y lied to you, or candidate Y is not all cracked up that they told you they were. And then what? You've now run your mouth making a bunch of promises that these guys have no intent in keeping, and we look like fools. We need to be very, very careful about who we're picking. We got to make sure that they're right of center. And look, there's a very wide swath of what some people are comfortable with right of center. But we can all agree that we don't want center and we don't want center left. I'm okay with right of center. Certainly got to be better than what we've got now. But the key is they have principles and they stick by the principles and they remember who they're working for. Again, we have to be sure. We have to make sure that we pick the right people, that we support the right people, that they do the things that they say they're going to do, and then they're not just running their mouth. We have a whole lot of elected officials that do nothing more than run their mouth. Now, the sad thing is the things that we don't want them to do, they're largely successful in doing, and the things that we need them to do, and they said they were going to do, they don't deliver on. And then, what do you know, next election cycle, they get put back in for various reasons, and we have to deal with it once again. But again, don't run your mouth. I mean, I am fairly certain that my state rep knows in his heart of hearts, if he gives a rip for more than 5 seconds or 2 seconds on what I think about anything, that he's let us down, he's let me down. But you know what? I'm sure he's mollified himself that he's going to get a bunch of money from Speaker Dade, and he's going to get a challenge in the primary. He's fairly certain of that, but I got enough money, it won't matter. I mean, you spend $1 million the first time to win a representative seat. What's another $1 million or $2 million? I mean, it's just crazy money. If these guys are supposed to work for us, I'd sure like to know where all that money's coming from and what they're getting for their money. Because nobody invests that kind of money without getting something for it, in my opinion. But again, we can run our mouths all day long, but if you don't deliver, what's the point? We've got to stay right. Okay, last thing. As part of running your mouth, you have to hold the line, right? If you can't hold the line, nothing matters. So if you're going to run your mouth, and in your mouth has been run out beyond what you're capable of holding, what was the point? If you're going to run your mouth and say we're going to replace you all, but then you go 1 for 3 or 0 for 4, oh man, that's brutal. It's brutal. It's worse than the endorsements that we put out this last term, right? Do you really want to sacrifice the party, the future, because you're angry now? Look, I'm disappointed. I wish I could say I was entirely surprised, but I figured at least 2 of our state reps would say, well, they don't really need my vote. I'm not 100% sold on this. I'm going to stay out of this. I really figured we'd get at least 2 of them. Nah. And I look at it this way. They're not betraying me. They are betraying the Attorney General. They are betraying the party, going after a member of leadership in the party, when all the time that they've been there, the governor has been guilty of abusing his power, and they've done nothing about it. Not a darn thing. They barely even talk about it. So Why? Why should I give him a free pass on that? Why is that suddenly okay? But again, it doesn't do me any good to run my mouth about all these state reps stink or all these state reps need to go away if I can't deliver. And I'm sympathetic to those of you out there doing it. Don't get me wrong, but you ought to make darn sure that you have money. You ought to make darn sure you have a much better candidate. And you got to make darn sure that you have an army of people that are dedicated to getting that person across the finish line. If you don't have all of that, running your mouth all day long only makes you look foolish and only damages us further, because the more that these representatives feel like they don't need us in the grassroots, the more they think that they can just check out of the party itself, the more dangerous it becomes for the rest of us. The more challenging it is to make sure that we get our stuff done, the things that are important to us. Because we're alienating the people even further that have a tenuous grip on the party as it is. And by tenuous, I mean they're only tenuously a part of the party. I would imagine that a good 30 of the state reps would gladly kick the Republican Party to the curb if they thought they could get away with it. We shouldn't make it easier for them. But again, unless you can be certain that you have an army and money and good people to run against these people in a primary, we're dead in the water. And one last thing. You can do all that time, money, and effort to get the best candidate and run them against the incumbent of your choice. But I got to tell you, in a straight-up race, it favors the incumbent. Consider what I'm saying there. We've seen it done many times before. You run 3 or 4 candidates with maybe 1 or 2 of them being better than the rest because you want to eat up that incumbent's time, money, and effort. You want to make it that much harder for the incumbent to have a focused answer. And the real sad thing is if you doubt me, look at Van Taylor. But for the fact that he got caught with his pants down literally, and he broke his oath to his wife and the United States government, he would have won that election. He could have got 50% plus if that wouldn't have broke. And with all the stuff he did wrong, which, in the grand scheme of things, not sure it was enough, but with all the things he did wrong, with all the quality candidates and other candidates running against him, they had all they could do to drag him down to 49 and some change, even after that scandal. So if you think you're going to just pop off these incumbents with some half-hearted attempt, with some second-rate candidates, you got another thing coming. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your nose to the grindstone. We've got about 3-4 months to come up with answers to all of this. We've got to take action. We've got to be sure that you make the right decisions. So remember, quit running your mouth, do the work. If you have any doubts of what's what and how to get things done, again, I will direct you to the folks over at True Texas Project. They have tons of experience in this matter. There are other people locally to you that can probably speak to those issues, but I don't know who all those people are. But I can tell you that I do know Fran and Julie. I wouldn't say we're best friends or nothing like that, but we're acquaintances, pretty good acquaintances, and I respect the work that they do and what they're working on all the time. But if you want straight answers, if you want to have a general idea how things work, those are 2 really good opportunities. They're all over the social media. They're not hard to find. And I'm sure there's other people out there, but if you want to step up to the plate, or you think you have the right candidate, or you think you can help raise money, get your act together now. Start working now. And if you have questions, there's a ton of people that can give you answers. You just got to make sure they're good answers. And with that, we're going to cut it short today. Time's a ticking, and we got work to do. Remember, you got to make those offensive moves. You got to have an offense. All the defense in the world is great, but if you can't do anything offensively, you're dead in the water. And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.